Hello, my fellow wealth hackers. For anyone watching on the YouTube, you can see how messy my office is. I need to stop using my new office as an excuse because I haven't lived the thing. Thank you, everyone who's reached out and asking about my son Bruce. He seems 100%. It's now been 8 days since he left hospital and he's finished his antibiotics. So today is the first day that he's been allowed to, do everything he normally does. Uh, go full out as young boys tend to do. So he'll go for long bike rides and go run around the splash pad and stuff like that. His visit to the dentist was fun, as his front tooth is now toast. Actually, think of the front two teeth; they're now toast. Uh, they're still there, but they're no longer alive. The dentist said to leave them because they're not bothering him. But we're going to have to monitor them, and I think they fall out in a couple of years. The dentist also found a cavity while poking around. Thank goodness we bought our own benefits plan for our family and also for a few of our employees to soften the financial blow. I know many of you out there who are self-employed don't have benefits. We go through our local Chamber of Commerce. I'm a member of the Hamilton Chamber, so we are able to purchase essentially a group plan because we are a Hamilton Chamber member. So the benefits plan is indeed a group plan and is spread among the tens of thousands of employees among Chamber members. It's actually deemed one of the best things about being it's one of the most popular things about being a member of the Hamilton Chamber. And then so that way the diversified over those tens of thousands of employees. So our cost is somewhere around $300 a month. And we will make good use of that. It's funny because when I said to the pharmacist hands me the bill I have to pay, right? And I said, "Oh, that's awesome! It's like $11." Yeah, I don't. And I'm not sure if she took that as a positive or negative, so I clarified and say, "Well, I pay for my benefits, so it's nice to be getting benefit out of using my benefits." So we're getting our money's worth between this emergency dentist visit, the upcoming cavity repair, regular dentist service maintenance, a private room at the hospital that we had to use when Bruce fell down, and now we're getting some massage therapy as well. Someone recommended a massage therapist. We invited them into the office, and they've been coming in weekly so far. This will be the third week to massage the staff. Hope that sounds right. Let's move on. Hopefully, you're all out there taking care of yourselves and enjoying the returns you're making from your real estate and stock hacking. Never forget, life is short, so do not forget to enjoy the fruits of your labor. I've spoken to many of you, and then this week, yet another newer real estate investor. He's only been investing for a few years. Actually, no, that's not fair. He's been investing for maybe about 8 years or so. He's a good friend of mine, and his real estate's fully tenanted, and it's all over. He's got some stuff in North York. He got some stuff in student rentals in St. Catharines. Everyone's paying him rent, and he's cash flowing. And also, he is a stock hacker, averaging $2,000 per week. Have a wild guess if he cash flows more from his real estate investments or his stock hacking. Yet again, another example of real estate investing for wealth creation, stock hacking for cash flow. Speaking of cash flow and stock hacking, here's a quick note on Cherry and I's she trader versus he trader. 2 weeks ago, I missed the update from last week, but I knew I just forgot to write it up and to share it. Cherry beat me by a whopping $40 American. But a win is a win. She beat me, but we still combined, and then we combined for over 8,000 US. And then this week I won, so I believe the score is somewhere around 16-6. That might be understated. She could be beating me by 18-6. Anyway, she's beating me by a significant margin. I'm not sure what the lesson is here, but ladies, you can stock hack just as well as the men, or better than the men. I actually spoke to a single mom of 2 this week who had taken the original course and the new and improved 2.0 version of the Stock Hacker Academy, and her weekly average is $2,500 a week. I really wish more single parents out there would have the same tools to be able to do the same. The lesson for the men, I don't know, maybe you can get lucky like me and have your partner out earn you. I personally have no problem with my wife making more money than me. I'll make Cherry pay for our next round of golf, and we're going out taking a friend out for dinner tonight. And I said that she's buying because she had a 4-figure day today. And for that, when wanting a bit more detail, She had a deep in the money call option on Apple for those who know stock hacking or stock options. If you're interested in learning more about stock hacking, I'll be hosting another demonstration over Zoom. We almost broke the system last time as we had over 500 people register, but the capacity for webinar is only 500. We will not be making the recording available for privacy reasons, so make sure you're there on September 10th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'll have several family and friends on the call as well on the webinar, because I honestly do get asked to give demos several times a week. But unfortunately, these are COVID times. I'm really busy between investing in business, and I'm protective of the time I'm supposed to be in the gym, golfing, Raptors playoffs, and family time, of course. The link to the Zoom webinar is ridiculously long, so just go to the website, which is decently long, www.truthaboutrealestateinvesting.ca, and you'll find the link there. I've also posted the link in my social media bio, my Instagram, my Facebook, and if you're on my email list, then you'll get an email about it as well. It's totally free. It's a much better demo than the one I gave to my kid cousin at Thanksgiving last year, and he's averaging over $1,000 per week in cash flow, or about a 28% return on investment in 2020. FYI, he is a musician by trade, so he's a smart guy, but he's not like a rocket scientist. Honestly, anyone can do this stuff. So we're talking about cash flow, and speaking of cash flow, we have someone who's very good at generating it. And his name is Ryan Carr of RW Carr Investments as this week's guest, talking about the highest and best use, and because he actually enjoys being creative in real estate. It's pretty cool. He found like the perfect vocation for himself. How he groups his he shares how he groups his real estate investments into buy, renovate, and hold. That's like one bucket, and he has another bucket for short-term renovations, developments, and flips. And then he has another bucket for longer-term projects, including a waterfront 14-unit multifamily he renovated that went hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget. How did it work out? You'll have to listen to find out. Plus, this is the first time on this show for anyone to talk on the subject and about the subject of the passing of Stefan Aarnio. Ryan was one of his clients, and was a coaching client of Stefan and a friend. So we'll talk about that as well. Rest in peace, Stefan. I think most of you already know Ryan. He's been on this podcast more than anyone else, because he's a smart guy. He's always got great stories as well. And he's always up to something big, whether it's writing articles about how to increase cash flow by renting out sheds, vertical splitting of duplexes. Many are familiar with basement apartments. So Ryan will, if the property, if it's necessary, if it makes sense for a property, he will do a vertical split, as in there'll be a vertical wall that divides the property down the middle. It's a vertical wall, versus most people do a duplex, called horizontal duplex, basement on the basement floor and then the main floor. He's done tiny homes, and he's done some small multis, and the list goes on and on. And he also shares a story how he bought his cottage off market. So I think some of you will be interested in that as well. If you don't know Ryan, you soon will, because he's always up to big things, and he's up to bigger things that I'm sworn to secrecy about. But here is an interview that we can share. I give you Ryan Carr. Ryan, what's keeping you busy these days?
Lots, man. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for making the time, because I know how freaking busy you are, and you only have the time because we had a cancellation today.
We did. When the time opens up in the schedule, you got to take advantage, right?
Yeah, that's why I jumped on it. It's like, I've been meaning to get you on because I know you've been up to stuff, and you're always up to stuff. You're skilled at scaling. And sorry, I cut you off. Please, what are you up to? What's keeping you busy these days?
Please continue. I'll take all the compliments you got. So, lots. So we're pretty busy. We got some houses being built right now. We got some new build duplex vertical splits on the go. I've got some land planning and land assembly projects underway. I want to do some small infill low-rise apartment buildings. We've got some rural properties that we're working on. Writing a book. Like it's busy, man. Things are going good. Really good.
Okay, let's start off there. I love Tim Ferriss, but the book, the title 4 Hour Work Week, you're doing a 4-hour work week, right?
Oh, oh yeah, sure.
No,
Yeah,
what is your hours?
I okay, so I work a lot. So right now I'm subscribing to the program that um, I'm over indexing on the front end so I can reap the benefits on the back. And I think a lot of people do this, especially a lot of entrepreneurs early on in their career. They will work harder than smarter, I guess is the best way to put it, so that they can do and reap some of those benefits on the back end. So for me, I mean, I'm doing that. I would typically put in a 12 to 15 hour workday every day, at least 6 days a week, which is to a lot of people insane. But I've seen the portfolio grow. I've seen what we've been able to achieve in the last number of years. And at some point, that will absolutely taper off and that will absolutely come down to be more efficient.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm still generally active in the business, so it does take my time. But yeah, at some point, we're going to scale that back and change the way that we do things. But for now, it's 12 to 15 hours, pound pavement.
When do you think you scale back, and what does it look like?
I'm trying to quantify that. It's funny you ask because I was thinking about that. I don't know. I'm gonna say 2 weeks ago. I had a lot on the go, and I had a day that was just like super crazy, and I'm like, whoa. Sometimes you just get these moments, like when you get married or when you have kids, and your perspectives change. Um, I'm starting to have a perspective shift now. So I've been doing it full time since 2014, real estate on and off since 2012. And I'm starting to have this perspective shift on, okay, the portfolio is built, things are self-sustaining. Um, how does that look moving forward? So I think it'll
Mhm.
be a little bit more clear in the next 6 months as to how specifically that will play out.
Mhm.
Do we scale up? Do we scale down? Things will change, but I don't know how that's going to change yet. So it's yet to be seen.
Do you know like what your quote unquote retirement looks like? Do you have a picture of that?
I don't. I don't. I try to work my way out like 1 to 5 years. A 10 to 15 year plan, I just think is too far out for me. It's really hard. Like theoretically, could I sell everything right now and retire and live really comfortably? Yeah, I guess I could. A lot of real estate investors could do that. I'm no different. I absolutely could, but I think I'd be bored. So I've got this like I've got these two poles that are always fighting each other. I really enjoy what I do. I
Right.
love to find deals. I love to do not the physical construction, but aspects of the planning and design and things like this, land planning. I love to do that. So if I just sold it all and said, okay, I'm retired now, I would give it 2 months and I'd probably be back doing the same thing. So that's
Right. Right.
that's the fight that I have every day.
I've heard that many times from people who actually are like in their 50s and 60s that are like crazy successful, is
Yeah,
they do get bored. They did try to like they moved to Florida,
yeah,
came back 2 months later,
yeah,
started something new.
yeah, for sure. Like how many? I've got the saying like, how many cigars can you smoke and how much wine can you drink? And I mean, at the end of the day, it's the people that you're sharing those experiences with that really matter.
Mhm.
But you got to find something that's fulfilling for you, and being creative is one of those things.
One of the Carnegies, I forget which one, Dale or Andrew. I the story I read was that their quote unquote retirement was they had a large cottage property, and they would work 6 to 12, 6 in the morning to 12 every day. And because they had a vacation property that was sizable, they would invite friends and family to come to them. So then his workday ended at noon, and then he joined his guests and family at 12, and the rest of the day was off.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
That's really good. That way you get a bit of both, right? You get some humility and a good lifestyle, but you also get to do some of the things you love with business. That's
Hmm.
great.
Hmm. And actually, we'll talk about yeah, it's a good segue to the cottage. We'll get to that in a
Okay,
second.
sure.
And because his home was a destination,
Mhm.
people would come.
Yeah,
Right? Who says no to that?
that's right.
Right? So that's actually a good segue. We're a little early I didn't want to talk about it so soon, but it's a good segue to you just bought a cottage.
I did. I did. So about a month back, 2 months back, um, my wife and I had picked up a piece of property out in Prince Edward County. And you'd mentioned about going to a destination. Well, this particular parcel is right on Lake Ontario. It's a really, really beautiful piece of land. It's got a little house on it and a garage, and it's a bit of a fixer-upper, which is obviously exactly what we look for. And it's in wine country. So Prince Edward County is very similar to like a Napa Valley or Niagara Falls or things like this in terms of wine. It's the up and comer. right? So at some point, this will be the destination and the hot ticket, and we're hoping to capitalize on that for sure.
I don't know how up and coming it is. It's Sandbanks, so
It's
that's
coming, man.
one of the isn't that like one of the top beaches in
It
Ontario?
it absolutely is. It absolutely is. So for the people that know about it, I mean, it's an amazing spot to be, and it's very, very popular, very heavy on the touristy side. Um, but I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it's just going to double. It's going to explode.
Hmm. It's actually one of the arguments for cottage investments is whether or not people think global warming is real. It sure does seem to things are getting warmer, and
Mhm.
they'll just there's this whole our whole neighbors that are like 300 million people south of us.
Mhm.
It's going to get hot there.
Yep.
So you imagine some of them will want to come up. Once the borders open. I'm talking
That's
long
true.
term. I'm
That's true.
not talking about next week. I'm talking about
Yeah.
the next within our lifetime. I think things will be considerably warmer, but yeah, it'll be probably a
So
good investment.
if we see an iceberg floating through Lake Ontario, we know that it's coming, or what?
So talk to the story how you got it, because it's actually a great example of a bigger strategy that you like to tell people. So where did you find the property? Was it on
Yeah. So
MLS? Was it a wholesaler that brought it to you? Were you door knocking? What happened?
this was online. This was on Kijiji.
Uh
So
huh.
one of my longtime pastimes is to look for properties any way that I can find them. Usually they're through yellow letter campaigns, or I don't know, some far off way. They just come, they just show up. And this one happened to be on Kijiji, so my wife actually found it. And we've got a property or a couple of projects going on out that way already. So she calls me and she goes, "Hey, where are you guys right now?" And I happen to be in the truck with one of my employees, and we were heading out to look at one of the deals that we we're already doing. And she goes, "Where are you guys right now?" And I said, "Well, we're not too far away from this location." And she goes, "Well, you're pretty close to a waterfront property that I just found on Kijiji." She found it like on page 9, like way deep in some
So
off post.
they're not reposting. They're not
No,
they're
no,
not
no,
they're not paying for top ad. Nothing.
nothing like this. No, this was deep. So this
Nice.
this this was deep, and we've been looking for cottage property for a bit. And so she finds this property, and she's like, "This is perfect. You've got to go check it out." She's like, "Do you have a purchase agreement with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. I never leave home without a purchase agreement, right? Like phone, keys, wallet, a purchase agreement. That's the standard."
In a mask these days,
And
but yeah.
and a mask.
Sorry.
That's right. And yeah, so she goes, "Give this guy a call. Here's a phone number. See what they say. Go check it out." So we happened to be about 10 minutes away. I asked the seller where he was located, and he happened to be pretty close too. So we tagged up, and right there on the spot, I said, "Hey, if you guys are ready to do it," it was a retiring couple that was selling, and I said, "If you guys are ready to do it, we can do this thing right here." And he goes, "Yep, that sounds great." And we did it right there on the driveway. It was awesome.
Did you ask the story? What's the story here with the
I
property?
always ask that story. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what's the story here? What's going on with this place? Right?
So, listeners, hopefully you wrote that down or you burnt that to your memory. What's the story with the property? So, what
Yeah.
was the story with the property?
In this case, the owner had owned it since I think it was the early 90s, 94, something like that. And they had lived in the property, they had rented the property, they lived in the property again, and then finally they had moved out. And this particular individual owned a couple properties locally. So this wasn't the only one that he was selling. And the overarching principle here was that he was looking to retire. So they were looking for something clean, quick deal. They didn't want to have to fix it. There's a little bit of like dated finishes, and it needed shingles and stuff like this inside. But overall, the place was pretty clean. And I looked at the land. The land value just so happened to be where I wanted it to be, short term and long term. And it was also out of the floodplain, which is a rarity when you're buying along the periphery of some of these lakes. So because we were high and dry and it had all of the check boxes and the prices were right, I said, "Hey, let's do it. Let's tie it up right here."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the Kijiji is a hobby of yours.
Yeah.
Before we were recording, you said you did Kijiji, you were on Kijiji like even longer ago, even before you were doing properties, right?
Yeah, I was 100%. So before the whole Gary Vee craze came in by going garage sailing, I was flipping on Kijiji as a kid all the way up to today. I think that a large portion of my skills came from doing some of this hand-to-hand combat when I was younger. Because when you're buying something, let's just use a bicycle as an example. When you're buying a bicycle on Kijiji, you're effectively going out, somebody's put something for sale, you're negotiating for that product, you're meeting the seller, you're the buyer, you're transacting, right? You're taking it back, you're maybe adding value in some manner, fixing it up, painting it, whatever, and then you're selling it back to the market at ideally what would be a profit. So all of the same principles apply for Kijiji flipping as they do for real estate. And I think this is a huge way, especially for some of the younger listeners who are looking to get into the market but don't have a ton of money. This is a great way to get good at your skills and start trading properties or sorry, not properties, but products that they're comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually reminds me, like a friend of mine worked at Canadian Tire, and they would always be throwing almost perfectly good product out, like returns or minor defect with the property, because so much stuff is made in China, for example. It's more expensive. It's cheaper for them just to send a new product versus sending it back, so it ends up in the bin.
Yes.
So then if you're if you're decent with your hands, you can probably fix it. Or you can take, for example, if they throw out 2 bikes, you can probably have enough parts to make 1 good bike out of it.
To make one. That's right.
With free materials.
That's right. That's right. There used to be a TV show called The Liquidator, and I would watch this thing like all the time. This guy he was from Vancouver out in BC, and this guy was just like a hustler grinder. He'd run around town and he'd be buying like old restaurants that have gone bankrupt, and he'd buy all the stoves inside and sell them, or all the fridges inside, or he'd go buy like a whole skid worth of tomato sauce and call up some wholesaler that he's never met and say, hey man, look, I got like 14 skids of tomato sauce. It won't fit my warehouse. What do you want for it? And he would sell it that way, make 5 points, 10 points, 20 points on the deal and never have to touch it. So that was his way of doing it. And watching that show was so inspirational. Every time I'd watch it, I'm just like, oh my God, I got to go buy something. You just come off there like so fired up. So that's great.
Awesome. Yeah. How old were you at this time?
I was probably like maybe 15, 16, something like that.
It's called The Liquidator? Is this still on?
The Liquidator was like within the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay. So
yeah, you can catch some clips on YouTube, and it was on OLN at one point.
Yeah. It started in 2012, reality sport, 4 seasons. Jeff Schwartz,
that's the guy's name.
Fascinating.
Yeah, great show.
I might have to get that for my kids.
So good. It's so good. Go ahead.
It's funny, what's in front of you becomes part of you. You know what I mean? My kids are quoting Warren Buffett all the time now. It's hilarious.
The cartoon show that he has? Is it the cartoon show?
Yeah. And it's old. It's not well animated or anything, but that's all we let the kids watch, really.
That's good. Instill it early and it just becomes second nature, right? Yeah. That's great.
People are well worried about what to let the kids watch, and kids love TV. That's awesome. Now, the other cool thing about the story with your cottage is, for example, in my own investing, I don't want to invest outside of my zones, right? I have areas, I have teams that I invest in, but the cottage, for example, is out of your regular area of. It used to be more out of your area, but can you share with the listener what your strategy is when the property is outside of your area? Because Prince Edward County is about most of your properties are in Oshawa.
In the Durham area, yeah.
area.
This would be about an hour and 15 minutes away from me.
Right. So it's not it's not an ideal commute for your staff to be spending 2.5 hours on the road each day.
It's not.
All right. So can you share how did you mobilize your local team to be on site an hour and a half away?
Yeah, so I typically run between 1 and 3 crews, 1 or 2 crews locally, and then an auxiliary crew in a sub-market that my full-time guys wouldn't normally be. And in this case, because my auxiliary crew is busy on some other properties that we're working on, we happen to have a slot in the schedule where I said to my own T4 staff, I said, boys, what do you want to do? Do you want to pick up a project locally, or do you want to go and do a cottage property and maybe live out by the beach for a little bit? And they said, hey, we want to go work on the beach. So we got them a trailer and we bought a yurt. And the property.
Sorry, you bought a what?
A yurt, like one of those big canvas tents. Yeah. Because living in a renovation is tough, right? So we're renovating inside the house, and then we've got the garage for all the material storage, and then the guys are living in a rented, I don't know what the term is, but like a Winnebago kind of thing, like an RV trailer. That's got heat and AC and a stove, so it's fully self-sustaining. And then they basically walk across the driveway to work every day, do the thing, have a swim at lunch, make burgers, and watch the sunset. It's great.
Are they enjoying themselves?
They are very much so. It's a different spin. I mean, doing cookie cutter rental properties is one way to do it, right? Doing flipping is another way to do it because you've got different elements of design. But I mean, this is completely different because everything about it is like nothing that we would typically do in the
Right.
city. You know, out
Right.
here we're going beach vibe, coastal, some different tiles, lots of whites, things like this. So it's a fun way to do a project for sure.
Can you share what is it cost? What is it costing you then for to be able to mobilize your team like that?
Ooh,
Because
okay.
I know you're a numbers guy.
Yeah, I am a numbers guy for sure.
You're
Well,
the RV. You're paying for their meals, right?
yes. So I gave them, so we'll start with meals. Um, Initially, I started thinking like, should I give them a per diem? Should I buy them beer? Should I pick up the burgers? Like, what do we do? You know, this is kind of new territory for me. So I just said like, hey, you guys have my visa. You just go buy what you need, and I'll cover it, right?
Nice.
And yeah, like just give them carte blanche. I mean, I just found that it's a really good way to look after people. They'll eat what they want to eat, and they can drink what they want to drink, and they can buy it whenever they feel it's needed. And
Mhm.
I found that's a good way to do it. So that was the food side of it. In terms of the living accommodations, I I would kind of consider them to be expensive. I think to rent the RV is like $1,000 for the week. So you're doing a project for a month. There's 4 grand sitting right there. So what we're trying to do right now, because we are still mid reno, is we're trying to schedule the timeline such that we can always have functioning water, bathroom, shower, things like this, and maybe one or two of the 3 bedrooms that are relatively clean to stay in. So if we can tighten up the 1 month of trailer rental into 2.5 weeks, we can save a little bit there. And it just helps with the natural progress too, to see the guys working their way through kitchen and bath, stuff like this.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And for
Mhm.
those, I had to Google your because I didn't know what that was. YURT. It's Turkish, apparently.
Yeah, it's a big beige canvas tent, and in this case, ours is 16 feet across, so it's pretty big, and then it goes up into a pyramid point, almost like a circus tent does. And you can sleep a bunch of people in there. Like my wife and I sleep in there when we go, or if we have friends, we can sleep there. And then the guys have their own space, especially during COVID. It's good to have their own space so they're in their own bubble. But they're fully air conditioned and plumbed and all that stuff. So it's proper. It's a good setup.
That's hardcore.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. All
yeah,
right.
man.
So we covered your team, mobilizing your team.
Hmm.
Again, I think that's important for people. I think a lot of people are struggling with cash flow in their current situations, in their
Yep.
current neighborhoods that they invest in. So I think it's a good story to share. So let's take a step back.
Hmm.
You've been known for many things, and I think it actually ties in well with what's the title of your book? We'll get into your book in a bit. What's the title of it?
Yeah, it's called The Highest and Best Use. It's all about real estate and how to find opportunity where other people aren't able to find it.
Right. And your path really leads into that well, because for anyone who's like read stuff that you put out there or followed your story, you were like the shed guy. You were renting out sheds for. Can you share? Okay,
Yeah.
for people who don't know, how much did it cost you to put in the shed? What did you rent them for?
Yeah, I did an article in Canadian Real Estate Wealth. I forget the specific number that it cost to put up a shed, but let's just say it's $500, right, to buy the shed, and then like a couple $100 to have it installed. So you put up the shed for like, I don't know, maybe $1,000, right? And maybe you rent a shed that's like a 10 by 10 for like $50 a month. Well, if you're making $600 a year on $1,000 outlay, that's a 50 or 60% ROI in year one. The
Yeah,
thing's
in year
paid for
one.
in year two, and then it's just all gravy beyond that. So
Right,
yeah, I
right.
did sheds for a bit.
That was like one of the early things that you were known for, and
Mhm.
then you were known for side splits,
Vertical split.
vertical
Yep.
split. So for the
Yep.
listener who doesn't know, can you explain what a vertical split is?
Yeah. To make it really simple, I was doing them in new construction homes, and I still am. And I was also doing them in renovation homes. So we would take a bungalow, for example, and when most people were doing basement apartments with one at the bottom and then one at the top, I was actually putting a wall down the center of the house and doing a left and a right. So each tenant would effectively end up with like a townhouse and 2 levels of living space, and it bumped the rents, and better for property management. There's less noise and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, we went through that phase too. I'm still there. I like that phase.
Yeah. And just for we've talked about it in previous episodes, so folks, Ryan has a whole lot, much more to share than he has, because it's been a while since he's been on.
Yeah.
So I've been chasing Ryan for some time to get back on the show. So we've had Ryan's covered it in past episodes. You can go listen to past episodes with Ryan on, and also just it's important for people to know that vertical split makes sense when it's a disaster property, right? That's
Yeah.
usually the starting point.
Typically, I mean, that's all I really ever buy is disaster properties. If you're going to go and tear a basement out, you might as well not pay for it on the way in. You know what I mean? You might as well find something vacant. But we've progressed quite a bit from basement apartments and vertical splits into some other stuff now too. So it's been a great wild ride.
And then more recently, I think you were known for tiny homes.
Yep, yeah. Did the tiny house. That was a couple of years back. That project, that was a neat one. That was a really neat one. That was almost like I guess you could call it like a cottage property in a sense, because it was kind of near a river and it had some really neat vibes to it. We bought a property that had a tiny house and a full-size house on it. The way that title was registered effectively allowed me to sever the land and keep the tiny house on one parcel and put the main house on another parcel. So we ended up with two houses for one purchase price.
Mm-hmm. And then that was a perfect case of highest and best use, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, anytime
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, anytime that you can cut up a piece of land into more titles, like more titles equals more money, typically. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even going in though, the primary house made the deal worth it, right?
Yeah, so I bought it knowing that it was going to be a bit of a marketing play just because it was really unique. I bought it knowing that the margins weren't as good as I would typically like to see for the amount of work that we had to put in. But I said, you know what, this is really neat. Let's try this. I learned so much going through it. So there was an element of education in that too. And yeah, we made money, which was great. But it wasn't the primary driver of this one, which is usually, my primary driver, making money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you got a lot of media attention for it. So we've covered that in the past episode, but I want to touch on it again. The amount of hate you got.
Oh, dude, so much
that
hate.
Thing's not worth it. Damn you capitalists.
I don't understand it. Like, we sold that property to an open market, so it was on the MLS, which means you can buy it.
You're a horrible person. Yeah.
You could not buy it. Yeah, like I don't know. If you want to come through, and if you don't. So we did a few open houses just for fun, and we had a ton of traction. Like, people were literally lined up down the driveway on the sidewalk. CTV or CBC News was there, one of the two. The Toronto Star covered it. I think the Globe and Mail covered it. BNN Bloomberg covered it.
A lot of local media.
Yeah,
all the local media.
All the local newspapers. We had 100,000 hits on Facebook. Like, it was insane, man. How many people knew about this thing? And now when you bring it up in conversation, even some years later, people are like, "Oh, you're that tiny house guy, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was me."
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And then, wow, and you're into, okay. Can you give us an overview of your current portfolio of what you hold, and then we'll talk about your projects?
Yeah. So at any one time, I typically have 8 to 10 open job sites in various phases of development. So when I say development, that might mean under construction for something like a basement apartment, right? We talked about that. That might mean something under construction like a flip. That might mean something that's being back-ended in terms of actual residential infill development. So like rezoning applications, severances, things like this. Anywhere in between is typically where I like to play. And I focus on 2 buckets. So I go short-term, long-term. All of the short-term stuff would be relatively quick in and out projects like a flip or a basement suite. And then my long-term stuff would be more the development play, where it's going to take me a year or 2 of planning to get to that point anyways. So while I'm doing the short-term stuff, that long-term stuff is actually playing out in the background. So when we get there in 2 years, it's ready to go.
And then, but you still hold properties as well. Like, you still have some long-term, you hold it and rent it out.
I do, yeah. So I keep half, I sell half is my kind of go-to. I take on partners strategically, but for the most part, I've generally done most of these myself. So I think as of a couple of weeks ago, I'd purchased about 40 some odd properties in the last 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. A couple of them have been with partners, like I say, and the rest on my own, just by way of some creativity and and strategic financing. So that's what I currently have purchased. In terms of tenants, I think I've got somewhere in the 30 to 40 tenants range, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that fluctuates, it comes and goes. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 35 tenants, something like that.
And you manage in-house, right?
We do. We do. We manage all in-house.
That's a lot of work.
It is. This is something
Because they're
interesting.
not all. Some of them are distant from where you live too, isn't it?
Some of them are. So those ones we don't manage in-house. So I guess 50% of the portfolio we manage locally in Durham. And then the other 50% I outsource. But what's really interesting about the properties that we manage locally is when I'm buying a property, because I'm buying the worst of the worst, that typically allows you to buy either at a discount or less than what the market would generally pay. So when I go in, I, I'm of the opinion that I over renovate a little bit on the way in, knowing that I'm going to hold that property long term in perpetuity. And the reason that I do that is because I've always wanted to build my portfolio on quality properties that aren't smashed up, right? And that have good bones, good infrastructure underneath it, because it never fails. You go to grow the business, and that thing that you did 2 or 3 years ago for that property that you only half renovated that you thought you'd get to next year, you never get to it. You never get to it. And that's why when I go in, I replumb things, I rewire things, I do it while the walls are open, because to move a tenant out is a complete pain. And not only are you losing rent, but then you still have to make that repair, and now all their stuff is inside. So I just go in, I do it all on the front end. I know that, okay, I might spend an extra 5 or 10,000 bucks now, but what's that headache worth to me when I do want to continue to scale my business? So I've put a little extra building block on the foundation so that we can scale and we don't have functioning issues with the property. We
Mm-hmm.
limit those issues to people and payments and tenancies.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story to share. I think most people understand that. Something that's cool with your businesses and that has enabled you to scale is you also front end a lot of the effort in building relationships with your staff. Can you
I do.
talk to that? Because investors, a lot of them are new small business owners, so they're often trying to do things on the cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the opposite of what you just said. You're like investing everything, you know, like that infomercial term, like set it and forget it. I've
Yeah,
always
that's
said
right.
that to people.
It's
Some
true.
people still try to cut corners, instead of replacing windows, just like try to block, just try to cap it instead, even though it's rotted out wood. Like let's go
Yeah,
cap it.
yeah,
Right? Like I'm gonna save a couple $100 there, but yeah, in your relationships, your employees, because I've seen it. I've seen it where people try to build businesses on, for example, cheap labor.
yeah.
And the sad part about cheap labor is often they get too busy, and now they're no longer reliable to you.
Yeah, cheap labor sucks. So I can't even sugarcoat that. Cheap, fast, and good. You can pick two, but you can't have the third, right? If it's cheap and fast, it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
If it's cheap and good, it's not fast. Like that's how it works. So when you're, at least for me, I can only speak to my experiences, right? And I don't tell people what to do. I just say, hey, this is what I've learned from. Is yes, you're right. I do front end the relationship with the employees. I give before I expect to receive, and I very much make sure that people are happy with where they're working. I came from an environment when I was working as a mechanic. I came from an environment where we were building armored cars. It was a very neat job. And the first couple months that I worked at this business, it was great. Everybody was rosy, right? The staff was great, management was great. And then over the preceding 2, 3 years, they stopped looking after their staff. And I slowly watched the morale in the shop go down, down, down to the point that they ended up laying everybody else off. And that's how we ended up in real estate. But what I learned from this place, and really reflecting back, I was basically being paid to go to school because I learned so much here, and it was all for the wrong reasons, right, of what not to do, is that I remember saying to the owner of this company, I said, like, hey, if you don't look after your guys, who's going to be here to build your trucks, right? And truthfully, that was probably pretty rude of me to say. I was probably like early 20s, and this like mid 40s, mid 50s man was like, trying to run a business. But I don't regret it because it was true, and sometimes the truth sucks. But like that stuck with me, and I remember saying this to this guy in the parking lot one day. Like, if you don't look after your guys, who's going to be here to build your trucks? And the same thing goes for, in my case, construction and real estate. If you don't look after your agents, if you cut them on commissions, who's going to be there to market your property? If you don't look after your contractors, who's going to be there to fix that pipe on the weekend when the thing happened and it's Thanksgiving? So like like what goes around comes around, and I'm very much a fan of looking after people. So yeah.
It's funny because it's exactly true. I had a conversation with someone on my team. They're asking. We had a client asking for a discount, and then they're being a pain about it. And I said, because we have a call list. When a great deal comes up, we have a call list. I said, move them down the list.
There you go. There you go. Right. All of a sudden, that I don't know. I'll be upfront. I pay 6% to sell my properties, and people go, "You pay 6%?" And I go, "Yeah, I do. I pay 6%." And they go, "Why would you do it? You can go to Free or Purple Bricks, sell it for free, or you could go here." And I said, like, the agents I use have systems. They market the crap out of this property, and they sell for over asking. So I'm happy to pay because I'm also receiving, and they do a really good job for me, just like you do for your clients. Like, if you support the same people over and over and over, they're going to support you back. So by that person saying, I want a discount, and getting bumped down on the list of off-market deals or really good opportunities, great. So let's just say they saved 1% on a $500,000 house, is $5,000. But maybe instead of being number 3, now they're number 12 on that list, and that list could have actually been worth $50,000, right? I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. And I give the same advice to people too when they say I'm having a tough time renting something.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, are you listing on MLS? And sometimes they're saying yes. And I said, up the commission, right? Yeah. You don't think it gets the agent's attention?
Yes, 100%.
Right? I'll 100%. Increase the cooperating commission, like even like $500, $1,000, right? Yep. If it saves you a month of vacancy, that pays back very easily.
Yes. Yeah. People, like, there's so many moving parts. So you got to look at the net of like the activity that you're doing. So, I mean, we talked about front ending the renovations. It's no different than commissions. If you carry that property for an extra month because you didn't pay more to get it on every website on the internet, right? And you carry that thing for an extra month because somebody didn't find it for that 4 weeks. Was it worth paying the extra 1%? Probably. The same thing goes for your staff. Like, give before you receive. They'll give it back to you. And I don't do this to be manipulative. I do it to be a good guy. And it makes them feel like part of the family, which is effectively how I operate. And they just love being there. So by them being there, or by them loving being there, they perform better.
Cool. Now I want to talk about your business, because you started with like single family homes, and then you've progressed to more severing and developing. Can you pick up? When was that point where you decided that you need to be bigger than just a single family home?
Bigger than a single family home. So it came down to opportunity for me. So like I was saying with the book, I'm a big proponent of highest and best use. And because one of the things that makes me tick is being creative, this just came by way of natural progression. I think in terms of ROI, there's a very long time horizon with development. So if somebody is driven by ROI immediately, they might be more of a flipper. Like we were talking about before, I'm more of a short-term, long-term, 2-bucket type of view. So when I was looking for opportunity, I said, okay, I've got enough short-term stuff right now. Why don't I do something long and just try it? And if I fail at it, I've got a little bit of runway, because I know I'm not going to get to that project for the next little bit anyways, so I can work it out. And that's effectively what led me to being able to spot these opportunities, is because, development's a long-term game and it takes time. But when you can understand development, and when you can understand the short-term stuff like a basement apartment or a flip, or you can understand wholesaling, now I've got the full package on the market. I can see, okay, hey, this is where the opportunity is. And that's how I've continued to grow.
So for example, I think you mentioned you're looking at doing a mid-rise apartment building, and you also did that property out in Trenton, which was a mid-size multi.
Yeah, it was 14 units.
Which one do you want to talk about? How about we talk about the one in Trenton? Because you're basically, it's finished, right? It's done.
It's done. We just had it reappraised, refinanced, all that stuff. We should be signing the refi documents end of this week.
Okay, so great. So we have the finish, the end of the story. Where did it begin? How long ago?
That one began May long weekend of 2018.
Oh, it's been a while.
Yes, it has.
So listener, People's idea of short term is different. You know, I used to consider 5 years midterm. So
Hmm.
for some people, 2 years is short term.
Yeah.
So, what did you have to go through for this property?
So I guess at that point in my career, I had maybe bought like 20, 25 residential properties. This was my first bigger, multifamily.
Uh-huh.
So that for me was like, okay, this is my next step. This is my next progression. There's a number of ways that you can grow in business. One of the ways is just doing bigger volume properties or more expensive ones, and that's how I took. And I bought that May of 2018. I looked at the property and I said, okay, I'm going to buy it for X. I'm going to renovate for Y, and this is what I think it's worth when it's done. So you do your conventional value add, do a reappraisal by the time you're done, and if the math works, then the math works. This one, in my case, took 20 months of renovations, which is so mentally taxing. Um, I can't even explain. 20 months of renovations is insane, you guys. So 14 units. We turned over 90% of the building. I inherited some tenants. We had to buy them out. Um, I had every problem you could imagine, extra renovations, bigger budgets, yeah, just all kinds of stuff happening. A lot of moving parts with something like that, with all those units and a bigger parcel. This piece of land was actually 2 acres, and it was also waterfront. So we had waterfront to contend with. We had building permits to contend with. We had tenants to contend with. And obviously the finances and carrying costs were a component of that as well. So yeah, 20 months of renovations. I think the reno was about 600,000 bucks. And overall, I was very pleased with the way it turned out. The tenants are happy, and it's currently being managed by an outsourced property manager who's fantastic. So the process was very good, all told.
Was this your local crew that did the renovation, or this is a new one?
No, so actually, yes and no. So I had a local crew to Durham who said they wanted to take on the project because one of their staff was actually already sort of out that way. So I said, okay, I'll give you guys half the building. Go start the renovations. Let's see how the process goes. It didn't really work out with them. So I had to change contractors midway through. That was a challenge. It was too far for my own guys to go, even though they did go a couple days here and there just to get some stuff done. In general, it's too much. So I had to change contractors midway through. I found a new set of guys out there who turned out to be amazing, like amazing. It was a referral, word of mouth. Because it was kind of far away, I just didn't have the time to go. And these guys, they pulled through. They were so good. They were expensive, but if you're looking for an hourly rate of return, like you're going to pay them more, but you have to put in less of your own time, then it's by far the right way to go. Pay guys, forget about the place almost. Call to season to taste, as they say, and when it's done, they'll call you back. And that's how it went. They were fantastic.
Fabulous. What can you share? Were you doing napkin math at this time? Can you share the napkin math?
Yeah. So I mean,
And like, what was it? What did you think the napkin math was going in, and what did it turn out to be?
the renovation was definitely higher. It was a couple $100,000 higher than I had
Just a
anticipated.
couple 100,000. What's a couple 100,000 between friends?
Well, when you're spending six, we spend 600 grand. If you're doing $100,000 reno and you spend an extra 20, you're at 120. You're like, oh shit, 20 grand, that sucks, but we'll get by. It's the same percentage. It's just scaled, right? So yeah, when I factored in the purchase price and renovations and all that, by the time I refied, it really did make sense. And doing this commercial refi was actually an interesting process too, because CMHC has just brought in some new rules where you can't take out all the equity that you would have previously been entitled to. So that's a whole other complexity that we had to go through, and the the refinancing process was about 4 months through CMHC.
Ryan, something I noticed about you is that you're more chill than most people. I would not be good. I would not be good for this project.
You just got to keep it together. You got to keep it together. This is like on a good day or a bad day. This is what you get. I'm right down the middle, man. That's it.
Because I know you've had lots of bad days, but you're still pretty level-headed.
I mean, even this week I had some real tricky days on one of the development projects that we had. Some hiccups that were not anticipated and turned out to be kind of expensive. And it's a good thing I caught it when I did. The days just come and go.
So sorry, you said 14 units and the rent was 600,000? That's a lot
Yeah,
per unit.
in this case, it was. So what is that? Let me see.
Was there anything structural?
600 divided by 14. Oops. What's that? 42,800 per unit.
Can you describe the property to the listener?
Yeah. So this was
Like the buildings, actually, specifically the buildings.
this was a unique one. So when somebody says 14 units, they typically expect a square box with a flat roof and a
Yeah.
corridor inside where you go into your unit, right? This was not
Yeah.
that at all, completely unconventional. So this was built back, I'm thinking in the 50s, 60s, something like this. It's 2 acres of waterfront property right on the Bay of Quinte. And that would approximate 700 feet deep, and I think it's 100 or 200 feet wide, something like that. So it's quite a bit of grass. On the property, there's a 6-plex. There's 4 slab-on-grade duplex cottages, and then there's a garage, which is effectively a storage unit. So what we did with the property was we renovated everything to what I like to call upper mid-range finishes, because they were all very, very tired. So we took them all to upper mid-range finishes, found a good tenant for that tenant profile that was out there, and found people that really appreciated living on the water. Some people just don't care, right? They never leave their home. They go to work, they come home, they sleep, that's it. They don't care about being on the water. So we wanted to find people that would appreciate this place, almost like a condo in a sense, where you've got people that want to take pride in their gardens and things like that. That's what we really tried to look for. And for the most part, we achieved that. You get a couple of people that don't don't subscribe to that, I guess. But for the most part, people are very much enjoying the property. So that's how it was laid out.
So what's the mix? Is these 1 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms?
All of the above. So we've got everything from bachelors up to 2+1s. The cottages are 2 bedrooms themselves. The storage units are typically 5 by 5. And the 1 bedrooms are anywhere from 400 square feet to 650.
Do you know what the rents are?
I do. Average rent out there for a bachelor, I think we're like in the 9s inclusive in this case, because of the way that the sub-metering works. But for the other 13 units, everything is privately metered. So a 2-bedroom, I think, is going for like $1,250, $1,350. A 1-bedroom is going for $1,100 to $1,200. It depends on when you place the tenant as well, right? But as we move forward, I mean, these rents are just going to keep going up. Like the demand in that market, especially being on the water, is very good.
Especially in COVID times, people want more space and nature.
Yeah.
And these are all long-term rentals? Did any of them end up short-term?
None. We went all long-term with it. I was of the opinion that doing a short-term rental would make it challenging to refinance. And I think that opinion still holds true.
Yeah.
Because if you have a vacancy, it's a vacancy, and unless you've got 2, 3, 4 years of track record to show the bank, this is why you guys should give me what I think you should give me. Right. I think it would have been very challenging. And even then, like the CMHC process was a rocky road to begin with. So you really have to justify and submit receipts and basically prove your case to make sure that you go through that process with relative simplicity.
Again, you chose to play the long game rather than taking more cash flow up front.
Yeah, I did. And that was a strategic decision. I'm not a short-term rental guy. I'm in that property for the long haul. I like it. I think it's great. I think Waterfront will appreciate. And there's still 2 of the 12 units that we have to turn over that we didn't renovate. So I think there's even more upside there than initially anticipated.
So in the refi, how much of your money were you able to take out? All of it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, your down payment, and
everything, down payment, renos, everything. Yeah. So
I'm in it.
Very much so. Yeah, it does very well. Very well. We got all of our rental money back, all the down payment, all the carrying costs. So we're into that for nothing. Plus, and we got some back too.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And that formed the down payment for your cottage?
Yeah, I guess you could say that technically, but yeah.
Wow. And just for the listener, just like the question for the listener, the question that pops into my head is, how many people are capable of doing this job? Have the capital and the mental fortitude, the stomach. And this is out in Trenton, right?
It is.
Is that right?
It is.
Trenton.
It's out in Trenton. So it's a growing market. I mean, it's not for everybody. Everybody has to have their niche. Durham was and still continues to be my niche. This is a sub-market that I'm test piloting. I think, it's no different than investing in KWC or going out to, Welland or Port Dover or any town anywhere, you got to be comfortable with it. You got to know the tenants and know the market. So having a team in place is number one.
Right, right. And you did your diligence on the area. Like you weren't just willy-nilly.
Yeah, I went out there and I understood what was happening. Like there's a lot of OW, ODSP, blue collar work, things like this. So when you're renovating in some of these smaller towns, you can't just go and throw pot lights and granite countertops in because you're never getting that back, baby. Like nothing. You're not getting, granite countertops don't matter when somebody says, well, all I can afford is $800 a month. So take it or leave it. It's a very different tenant profile than what you would see in maybe Durham or Hamilton or wherever. You got to be very careful and conscious on what you renovate. And even still, though, I mean, I front ended a lot of the renovations that I maybe didn't have to do for the sacrifice of long-term stability.
Cool. Oh, I had a question. I forgot what I was going to ask. Damn it.
I'll repeat for long-term stability.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about your market. What your feeling is in the market?
Overall?
Yeah, overall to Durham.
Yeah, overall. Okay, so something that I realized, I spoke for Canadian Real Estate Wealth a couple of weeks ago. They did an online seminar presentation, and I was part of a panel. And after I got off that panel, just from hearing some of the other people speak, I realized that I have a generally conservative approach to the market. So I will start with that. My approach is generally conservative, and I hedge that conservative approach by buying equity on the way in. So if you're going to buy, just like Warren Buffett says, you got to buy $1 for 66 cents, right? My general approach to the market is such that whether it goes up or down, if you're buying equity, you're going to be safe, right? So you have to buy, at least in my opinion and in my business, I have to buy, a property that has equity on day one. So if the market does decide to go sideways or does decide to go down, you're covered off. Now, that being said, my general opinion on the market is generally optimistic long term. I think we're going to have some short term challenges with tenants paying or when some of the CERB stops kicking in. I think we may have some challenges there. But as a general rule, supply and demand still applies. We still have more people coming in than we can supply in terms of housing. So, that being said, I think we're good. There's going to be some challenges for sure. Like there's no question. We're due, like we're so due for a recession. And how that affects real estate is yet to play out.
This was a recession.
But it was like, in my opinion, it was like fake, man. Like it came and the market fell down and the real estate market came off a bit and now things are rosy again. But I mean, people aren't fully back to normal. And I just think like
we have all the stimulus money still coming. Right?
It's just fake. So if this is the new normal, hey, right on. We're good.
Oh, the stimulus. They added 4 more weeks, I think, to the CERB, so it will end.
Yeah. So like I think we're due for something a little bit deeper, a little bit longer term. But you got to hedge. So stay liquid, stay in cash. There's going to be people that have to liquidate their properties, and there's going to be opportunity there. So just like I picked up a cottage on Kijiji, other people can pick up their neighbor's house because their neighbor's out of a job and they're looking to downsize. So you never know where that's going to come from, but just be ready for it.
Yeah. And then if anyone has any short-term plans to sell, I would sell before the election.
Yeah, that's an option too. Absolutely.
If you already have plans to sell, it depends though, right? So folks, remember this. That's general, and also my circle of friends is typically investors outside of Toronto. So I believe the story is different for the downtown Toronto condo. So don't take my advice for that. Like talking general, know your area, know your thing the best. Because again,
that's right.
Ryan and I are talking general. I'm not talking about Alberta.
Right? Yeah, like I don't know. I just know what I know, and that's it. I don't know anything about Vancouver or Texas or whatever. I don't know anything about those markets. I just know what I know, and this is where I play, and that's it.
Yeah, so we know what we play in. We know what we play in. That's right. I know a little bit about what Ryan plays in because Ryan tells me what he plays in and how things are going. Can I ask about Stefan?
Yeah.
I don't even know where to go because I haven't touched on it in the podcast. I've actually been thinking for a while that I should re-release the podcast I had him on for. Because one of the things about Stefan that he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way with how he presented himself. But when you actually got to but I know a lot of people who are close to him, and they're all great people, and they all were big fans of him. Like they were clients of him, they were close to him, and so like the public persona is quite different than who he actually was. Um, and
Yeah.
then and it's terrible what happened to him. So for those who don't know, we're talking about Stefan Aarnio, who has since passed. Um, I think I should re-release that podcast I did with him because he was a wonderful guest.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was he was polite, he was sharing, he was open, he wasn't rude or in your face or highly opinionated on anything that where rubs people the wrong
Stefan
way.
Aarnio? Stefan Aarnio was
Not when
only
he was on my
opinions.
pod. Not when
Oh,
he was on my
no?
pod. No.
Oh, my
I'm
gosh.
not his coaching client either, so I'm sure he's different. what can you share about Stefan?
Stefan was a very polarizing personality. He was, if anybody could be a philosopher and a business person combined, he was that embodied into one. So he had very interesting perspectives on life and business and government and policy and money and working and 9 to 5 or no 9 to 5. All of these different perspectives. You take that, you give him the info, and then he spits it back. And he was the kind of guy that would pretty much tell it to you straight, whether you wanted to hear it or not, which was good. And he had a very interesting way of doing it. Obviously, a lot of his marketing is very provocative. He gets a lot of people that are looking for maybe more of an edgy vibe, which is great. I trained with him and I did some coaching with him for a couple of years, and it was great. I mean, were we the best of friends? The answer is no. The answer is no. Would he show up at like a Thanksgiving dinner? With me, the answer is probably no. With some people, the answer would have been probably yes. And I think that just, that speaks to his character. He was a very intelligent man, very, very smart, and definitely died, obviously way too young. But he was before his time. So he definitely lived beyond his years. If he had gray hair and he was sitting on a board for some corporate conglomerate, he would have been very well received, 100%. And yeah, it's very too bad, or it's very sad and too bad that he died so young.
So it's just my guessing. I don't know. It's when he passed. One of the first thoughts I had in my head was like it's a terrible loss, but also I think his lifestyle killed him. As in, he just had way too much stress in his life. Yes. He was just on, like full on, too much.
Yes, the answer is yes. So that holds true with manufacturing, like in some of the third world countries or sweatshops and things like that, China, Bangladesh. Workers just work until they die, right? And they just fall over at their desk. And not that that's what happened to him specifically, but I think there's elements of that where he just worked himself so hard and worked himself dry. And dude, I even see that in my own life, and for anybody listening, you can only burn the candle at both ends for so long before you either pay for it emotionally or with your health or with your friends, your family. Other things start to fall off. So if you're looking for balance, working a 15-hour day is not the answer. You have to be more strategic than that. And he was a very strategic guy, which was great to learn from. And again, sometimes too, learning from what other people are doing and not getting the results or getting the results that you want to see is a good way to model your own life after.
And Ryan and I aren't doctors, in case anyone didn't know.
No.
I've just seen this pattern too many times where someone's full on for like 15 hours a day for too long.
Yeah.
And then something catches up to them. It's called something else. It's either heart disease or it's cancer. It's something else. But what got them to that point, especially before the age of 40, because was he 35?
I don't know specifically, but he was like 34, 35, something like that.
Yeah. So rest in peace. Let's move on. You have an exciting book to talk about. When's it coming out? Is it out?
Spring Market 2021.
Okay, so it's not even out yet.
Not out.
Is it written?
It's 3/4 written. We're going through editing.
Oh, really? Okay. So it's 3/4 way done. Like
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So So when you said 3/4, when you said 3/4 done, I thought you meant like you still have to write a quarter.
So the back end of a book takes like an infinite amount of time to produce.
Uh-huh.
You got to get it printed and edited and the cover page and where's it coming from and all this stuff. So we're targeting spring market 2021. It was a ton of fun to write, like a lot of fun. And some people said, "Are you going to ghostwrite it? You're so busy." And I said, "No, like I want to put the content in this book. I want to write it. For me, that's the best way to reteach myself what I already know."
Mm-hmm.
And I just really enjoyed the process, and it's been great.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. We'll compare notes later. Mine's being ghostwritten right now.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. I was texting with one of my clients, and she said, "Oh, something about oh, I was helping out with your book." I'm like, "What book?" I totally forgot because my ghostwriter reached out to them directly.
That's good.
Totally forgot. But yeah, and for the listeners' benefit, like Ryan and I are very different stages in our lives. I have 2 kids. Ryan has none still. So yeah, different stories. I have a lot more gray hair than Ryan. That I'm sure Ryan's catching up.
I am catching up. That's the long work day, so I got to knock it off.
Awesome. So what can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, so the book is all about the highest and best use. So the one thing I noticed over the last, however many deals I've done, is that every single deal that I've done had elements of this highest and best use concept. And what I did was I took all those deals, I laid them out, and I boiled them all down. And I said, okay, what is the common denominator with every single property here? And I've realized that it's highest and best use of 3 things. So when I look at a property, I'm looking at highest and best use of the structure, highest and best use of the land, and highest and best use of my own skill sets and time. And when I take those 3 things and combine them, that's what's allowing me to spit out deals, right? And that's what I've laid out in the book, is I've broken it down into those 3 categories, and it gives a good outline on how you can see a property and get I call it like a bit of an unfair advantage over the next person, because they don't see it the same way that you do. And not everybody's highest and best use is the same, even though you're looking at the same property, which is also very interesting.
Yeah, and then I just from what I know of you is like some of the advantages that you have that you had to build yourself there. Like you didn't start day one this way. Is that you have capital, you have access to capital, and you have your teams that help you do things. So that's pretty cool, because not many people have gone on the same journey as yourself to go to, like, now you're planning what's one of the bigger projects you're looking at doing? You're already in the works of going through for paperwork. Is it like 10 stories? Like, how big is it? Just for the listeners' benefit to know how big this stuff that you're growing into.
Yeah, so I just submitted a proposal for a 30-unit condo building that was in Durham. So we're still waiting to hear back on how that's going to play out specifically. That would be my biggest project to date in terms of units. We'll see how that plays out, whether it goes condo, whether it goes rental. We're not sure, but effectively the structure and the planning is all the same. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, everything else is more infill development, low rise, triplexes, sixplexes, maybe a 10plex. We'll see. Infill development, severances, things like that.
Yeah, you're very far off from cookie cutter real estate investing.
yeah, it's grown, it's evolved. You got to keep it fresh too. I mean, like I call highest and best use the new basement apartment. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, the basement apartment was a hot ticket. I think it still is. I think it's still great, but it's time for me to evolve. And I think there's opportunity for other people to evolve with it. And that's highest and best use.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How about for like the intermediate investor who already has a basement suite? Are you doing any additions for third units these days?
Me specifically, no. It's very common to do an addition at the back, or maybe a top up or a coach house, things like that. I've done a couple coach houses, as you know.
A couple? Only about the one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did the one, and then I did the tiny house.
Right. Okay.
Right? But top up renos, they're good. They're definitely good. Definitely have to control your costs on something like that. So I sold one, and here's a perfect example. I sold one, I'm going to say 4 months ago, and I'm looking at this property. It was a major fixer-upper, and I go in it, and I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, I think we can do this. I think we can do that. And then I'm realizing that if we're going to add a second suite here or a third unit, the basement's too low. So basically, we're going to cut the roof off, cut the floor plates out of the second and the first floor. So we'd be looking, we'd be in the basement looking through the sky, and then we'd rebuild inside. And I realized that by the time I went through all of this, the net at the end of the project was the same as if I put it up on the MLS, paid my realtor 6%, by the way. and sold it as is to somebody who wanted a fixer upper. The net
Uh,
was the same, but the time was cut by 90%, right?
and
So if
effort and your time.
time, effort, risk, uh, oh my God, you name it. Like if the end goal is just to make money in like a one-time transaction, you got to really get real with yourself, bro, and say, hey, like what are we actually doing this for? Like, am I going to put a top up renovation on? You know, to answer your question in terms of a triplex, am I going to put a top up reno on just to go and sell the property when I'm done and say that it has 3 units? What is that value? Versus, am I keeping this long term and reaping the benefits of the capital expense that we just outlaid? Right. So why are we doing this? If it's to make money now, does it make sense? Typically, construction's a dollar for dollar upgrade, give or take, right? The answer is probably no. If you're going to reap the benefits for 10 years, the answer might be yes. So you have to get really clear on what it is specifically that you're doing it for. You know, top up renos can be great, just as long as the dollars make sense.
So I have this problem myself is I always want to keep everything. I'm a bit of a
Yeah.
hoarder. For
Yeah.
people watching the YouTube, you can kind of tell I don't throw
You're
stuff
you're a
out.
collector.
I'm
You're
a collector.
Yeah.
I don't like selling it. I don't like selling anything.
A connoisseur, if you will. It's like a fine wine. Yeah.
So flipping, you know, I'm always because even like a flip, for example, like
Yeah.
I'm pretty bullish on my market. Like I
Yep.
can make all this more money in the future, and you're no different, right? You can make all this more money in the future by just holding it, right?
Yep.
How
It's
do you
true.
make that decision versus to get rid of it versus keeping it? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
many beginners have the struggle. Like, should I flip this or should I keep it?
They do. So it's complexity, it's financing, it's moving parts. It's how much can you take on. So I just wholesaled a few deals. I like to wholesale a few deals from time to time. I think that's fun. Some quick cash is good. The quick liquid is good. Obviously, you know, if somebody looks back and sees our podcast together, they're going to see a fairly common element in what I talk about, and that's staying liquid and staying conservative. You know, cash is your hedge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cash is the ultimate hedge against your downside risk. So I
Mm-hmm.
like to stay liquid just for the element of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's great to have 50 units or 1,000 units or whatever, and know that in 10 years they're going to be worth more. But if your financing won't get you to that 10-year mark, you're not going to make it anyways. You know, so you got to say to yourself and be honest. After I factor in vacancy and maintenance and repairs and maybe stress or management or what's my family dynamic like, or all of these different things that aren't necessarily strictly financial, but you know, in the periphery, what does that look like? And can you actually make it to the end? And if you can't, how far can you make it? And if you can only make it that far, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always evaluating, you know, just like we talked about there with that house we're going to cut the roof off on. Happy to do the work. I got the chops. I got the financing. Let's do it, right? But at the end of the day, if you're going to flip a house and make 50,000, let's say, or you can wholesale that house and make 42, is the $8,000 lift really worth the 6 months of effort, right? And that's what people miss: is the lift worth the effort?
Right.
That's what they miss.
Right. Something you and I have talked about is when we're not recording is sometimes just selling the paper is
Yes.
worth it.
Yes.
So you mentioned like selling wholesaling. So you have a deal and you just sell it off to somebody else. You assign the
Yes.
deal, take a wholesale fee. But there's also situations where you've talked about you have say you have a single family home and now you have the permit to suite the basement,
Mhm.
right? But is that a good example actually of just selling paper? Or
Yes.
severance. Severance is probably a better example, isn't that?
Yeah. So, I mean, for a severance, I give you a prime example. So, if somebody goes to build a house, right, they've got a double lot, maybe they cut the lot in half, they build a house on one half, and then they've got a vacant parcel on the other. That land might have a value. Now, when you go, or it will have a value, when you go to build a house on that land, it's going to have a second value. Now, what people miss and forget is that as a general rule, construction is not what makes money. You make money in land, you make money in planning, you make money in design, right? But four walls, bricks and sticks, it's like a dollar for dollar thing. So let's say your piece of land is worth 100 grand, and that's the net because you own that land free and clear. Let's say you go and put a house on it for a couple 100,000 and sell it for 100,000 more than what you built it for. Maybe you're going to make the same 100 grand on the back end. Well, is going through the effort of building that house to make the 100 really worth that time? And I'm just picking numbers here, folks. Like it can be anything, but you got to think like, why are you building that house? Are you building that house because you know what? In 2 years, you've got a development deal coming up that you need financing for, and you have to prove yourself for that bigger development? Are you doing it just to make the 100 grand? Are you doing it because you know that 5 years down the road, TD Bank might call you and say, hey, we've got a property that's going power of sale because your realtor heard about it and it's a development opportunity and they'll finance you, but they'll only do it if you have prior experience. Like, why are you building that house? Do you just want to do it because you love construction? What is it for? If it's straight for dollars, it may not make sense. If it's for something else or multiple things to keep you guys working, maybe you do it.
So hopefully less investors paying attention to that. Because I actually know people who bought a vacant piece of land, intending to build it, and then it became a complete nightmare.
Yeah, dude, it's like development is complex. It's complex. Like there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. If you're looking at a development deal, this is a good example. So I showed up on site earlier this week to a property that I'm building, right? And this is a long-term hold. It's a vertical split, 2-unit house, purpose built, 2 furnaces, 2 hydro meters, 2 gas meters, whatever. I show up and they were servicing the property. And that means they're putting water and sewer and storm connections into the footing right out from the municipal services on the road. So this has been paid for 6 or 7 months, right? $31,000 I had to pay to do the work that we had to do. The city comes in and they rip up the road and they do all this stuff. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go by the site on Monday just to make sure that everything is kosher. And I go there and there was supposed to be, to make it simple, 6 pipes in the ground. They were only installing 3. And they were about ready to backfill a hole. And I said, where's the other 3 pipes? And they said, well, that's not on our plan. I said, well, how are we going to flush the toilet if you don't put the other 3 pipes in? And they go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So like that problem there actually ended up costing me, never mind my time, right? Or the delays or whatever. That problem ended up costing me $6,000 in 10 minutes because of the problems that we had and the fixes that were required. $6,000, right? So like that's real money. $6,000 in 10 minutes. It sucks, And I had a development project 2-3 months ago where a similar problem ended up costing me $12,000. You can't even plan for stuff like this, right? And for whatever reason, I just felt intuitive enough to go over and make sure that the property was on track. And it was a good thing I did, because I would have waited another 2 months for a water sewer connection. So that's some of the stuff that goes down. So you got to make sure that the margins are there, I think, is the bottom line.
Crazy. And that you're not paying crazy amounts of money for your capital.
That too. Yeah.
Let's visit back. Can we go back to the book? Is there something that a pretty common example of highest and best use that a newer investor would miss out on, that they don't see, an opportunity that they miss?
Yeah, land value and zoning, I think, would be the big one. A lot of people right now are doing the basement apartment thing, which is great, because you can get that for the most part as of right on a lot of properties. What people miss, and what a lot of agents miss, truthfully, is the best use of the land. So when they're looking at that land, nobody checks the zoning bylaw. Very few people put the actual zoning in their listing to begin with, because they don't know and they don't want to misrepresent, which is right.
Yeah, and agents don't even check the legal status of a duplex,
right?
Because they don't even understand that. I don't know how they don't understand this, is the fact if it's legal, it's worth more. And they don't go figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
That's that's how I made the majority of my lift on my first basement apartment that I did. That was the second house I'd ever bought. I took what was there from non-legal to legal, right? And the lift on that was great versus the effort that I had to put in. And so that for me in that case was highest and best use. But yeah, land, I think you got to look at the value of the land, because as we grow in the GTA in terms of intensification, zoning matters. Very, very much so. Like if you own 2 houses on a corner lot, it might not be worth much. But if you own 6 houses on a corner lot, you no longer just own those 6 houses on that corner lot, right? With whatever those 6 houses multiply out at. You own multiples in terms of dollars on those 6 houses, because those 6 houses combined, you could go high rise. But those 6 houses on their own are just worth whatever the market says. So making land assemblies and finding highest best use that way is so huge, so huge. You can double down on your money for sure.
Friends of mine their parents, Korean immigrants. I don't know how they assembled the money to do it, but they bought 4 houses, all side by side, near Square One Mall in Mississauga.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like one I don't know the dimensions, like 50 by 120, 125, 150, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Developer came and wrote them a check.
Oof,
One
sweet.
point something. They bought each property for under 300 grand. Developer wiped them out for like 1.2 each or something like that.
Wow.
Right? Because, and like you said, they're not worth that much individually.
No.
But you assemble it, that's a condo, right?
That's right. Very strategic play.
Yeah. I don't know if they knew that going in. But
maybe not. Maybe you just buy the neighbor because it's convenient, right? And the guys, I think we talked about this earlier, the guy's retiring and downsizing, or they lost their job. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll buy the neighbor's house, and then that neighbor's house. And then it's just like, whoa, before you know it, there's your retirement fund. Right.
Because very simply, like you speak to your neighbors regularly. Like
always.
If you're ready to sell, I'm right
always.
Here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't outwardly state it, but they know what I do. Right. And I don't come out and like hard sell my neighbors. I just tell them, yeah, if you know of anybody looking to sell, please keep me in mind. You know, I'd gladly pay you a referral fee, or maybe I can renovate your house, or whatever I can do to help you. That's great. And generally speaking, you know, down the road, that relationship holds true. And it's always worked out in my benefit, and it's worked out in theirs too.
Ryan, I was just thinking what a nice guy you are. Because like I started this podcast, I called it Truth About Real Estate Investing because there's so many people I do not like in this industry. What are the good guys?
Thanks, man.
Right? You're out there to help people. You're not here to screw people over. Oh, man. Yeah, we both know people that are just horrific people.
Yeah, they're out there.
Awesome. So Ryan, if anyone wants to follow you along, where can they follow you? Snapchat, TikTok? Where are you at?
You know what? I actually don't even have a Snapchat, TikTok. I don't do that. Facebook, Instagram, the two best places. They can sign up for the book at thehighestandbestuse.com, or they can jump on my website, rwcarrinvestment.com.
Awesome. And you're not even posting like crazy either.
I've been busy, like legit busy. I'm trying to do better at it. So I'll try to post every day for you. Okay.
Yeah. And then just a point, like folks, notice I just said like Ryan doesn't post that much. For all these people whose real estate strategy centers around social media, Ryan does very limited, and he does quite well without doing much social media. So, not saying it doesn't work, just saying in Ryan's case he doesn't have to do it. Awesome, Ryan. Any final words you want to share with the listener?
Just be a sponge. I say this, I think, every time we get on. Be a sponge, soak up all the information you can get, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube, read magazines, read books, anything that you can do to get information that you need, and then actually taking that and put it to use is where it's at. So be a sponge, soak it in.
Right. Because I first met you at a Durham REI meeting, and you still go regularly, do you not?
I do.
If it was, now, I believe.
Yeah, I do. You know, it's interesting. You probably see this at some of your meetings as well. Like the people that started off as the newbie investors get good, and if they stick around long enough, they become the experts in the room. And that's actually how this has ended up playing out for me. Is I used to go and extract information from people because they were willing to give it, and I would graciously receive. And now, you know, I'm the guy giving out information, and I'm happy to help people help people and see them grow as well. So it's a lot of fun actually to be on the giving end and not always on the take.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I when I met Quentin, we were both green. When I first met him, I think combined we might have owned 5 properties. And look where we've gone.
For sure.
Awesome, Ryan. Thanks for doing this. Have a great day. Keep being awesome. Can't wait. I can't wait to read. Can I get your early copy of the book?
Yeah, 100%. I'll get
you
for sure. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Awesome. I'm making a free giveaway on my website. I'm totally kidding.
There you go. Yeah. Sell it for the highest bidder. Yeah.
Thanks again, Ryan, for doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you.